Hey, what's going on, everyone? Axel here. Today, I want to talk about microtransactions. And this is not going to be your typical gamer rant type video because this topic is something people get really riled up over. And while I do agree that microtransactions are a bad thing, I want to talk about it in just a logical, calm fashion, just very logical fashion, and go through some of the things that people say to defend microtransactions. Now, I will say, first of all, my opinion is that in a $60 game, a full price game, doesn't have to be $60, but a full price game, microtransactions should not exist ever, period. And I've carefully listened to both sides of this issue. And I've come to the conclusion that I don't think there's any realistic, logical argument that makes sense for you to argue for microtransactions in a $60 game. And that's what I want to go through today. So I'm going to list a few of the most common defenses of microtransactions and just give my response to them. Now, first of all, if this only applies to console games and to full price games. If this is a free to play game, this has no consideration because a free to play game doesn't cost anything. So if you play the game, while I don't like microtransactions in any medium, they're perfectly acceptable in a free to play game because it's free. You didn't purchase the game up front, so they essentially have a free pass to charge whatever crap they want because you can leave and not play the game and you don't lose anything. But let's go ahead and get into the meat of this discussion. And the discussion was spurred by the reveal of microtransactions in Shadow of War, which is a big AAA game coming out soon. There's going to be microtransactions in a AAA game, not a multiplayer. Well, I think it has multiplayer, but it's going to be loot boxes in microtransactions in a single player campaign. So let's talk about why this is not a good thing. First of all, the first argument people who defend microtransactions will say is that you don't have to buy them. It's optional. So if you just choose not to buy them, you can have your full game experience, period. No effect on you. You have the option to spend, so just don't buy them, and then you don't have to worry about them. But there's a lot of things wrong with this opinion. First of all, you have to look at the way microtransactions change the design of games, because the design of games definitely changes, and almost I'm not going to pretend to have gone through every single one, but the vast majority of games with microtransactions are designed around the microtransactions. And when I say that, that means that either one, the difficulty of the game is increased to be harder than it normally would be, to encourage the purchase of microtransactions, or the grind in the game is increased much more than it would be to encourage the purchase of microtransactions. So whether or not you buy the microtransactions, it's still hurting your game experience. It's still hurting you. So even if you don't buy that potion that helps you advance your experience, advance like 50% or whatever, you're punished because you're going to have to go through more grind. So it's going to hurt you whether you buy them or not. So just saying they're optional is not a valid argument because they're going to hurt you no matter what. I've actually played a couple of free-to-play games just as an example. I do like cell phone games from time to time. I don't play them very often, but I'll pick up and play a few just mess around with, just because sometimes I have some time to kill, like I'm sitting in a doctor's office or something and I want to play. One of the games I played recently was Kingdom Rush, and I felt like that game, it was fun at first, but the game, as I got into it, you would see, and this is typical of most cell phone games, at first it's a fun playable game, but the more you get into it, the more and more the game experience starts to break down unless you do buy microtransactions. So Kingdom Rush is a tower defense game, so you build archers and soldiers and stuff and try to defend against armies that will kind of try to walk into your castle. And for me, it reached a point where I felt like I couldn't feasibly beat the content unless I bought a microtransaction. They have these special power-ups you can buy that destroy everything on screen, and I felt like I think I got to like I got a lot far really far through the game, but I got to a point where pretty deep into the campaign where you can't advance. Like I tried this level over and over and over again, and I can't make it more than halfway through it. I've tried every strategy I can think of, and I really feel that you cannot get through the level without without buying one of these potions or buying gold, whatever, to buy potions. So and that's a case where the game was just solely built around microtransactions. So that's an example of how a game can be designed to hurt you, whether you buy them or not. I mean, because you reach a point in the game where you just can't. It's unnecessarily difficult or unnecessarily grindy for you to reasonably get through that. So the next example of a game is I played this stupid little game called My Singing Monsters, which is like another like cell phone tablet game where you just kind of like build these little creatures and they sing a little song, blah blah blah. It was kind of, I don't know why I played it, but anyways, that kind of had the opposite problem. It wasn't a difficulty thing. It got to the point where you have to buy certain elements to kind of make new monsters and breed new monsters. And at first you can do this, and it takes like say you want to breed a new monster to get the next part of your song, it would only take like 10 minutes. But as you get farther and farther into the game, it starts to get to the point where it's like, well, you can wait a week for this monster to finish breeding, or you can spend $2 and get it now. And it just got more and more, the grind got more and more lengthy, like to the point where it's like, if I don't spend money, like I'm never going to be able to get through the game. So that's another example of where microtransactions were encouraged through a grind. So I know I spent a lot of time on this point, probably excessive amount, but for this first point, that's why it's not reasonable to say that you don't have to buy them, because whether you buy them or not, your gameplay experience is going to be affected negatively. So next point, number 2. The next thing what I hear a lot, people say who defend microtransactions say they're just there as a convenience for those who don't have enough time, and that's what a lot of big companies say, and that's what the developers of Shadow of War said in a recent stream where they revealed the game. They said that these microtransactions, they're just in there to give those players who might not have enough time to play through certain parts of the game, let them let them skip through the content and get to the parts they do want to play. But here's the thing with that. Not giving the problem with this argument is giving the player that advantage does not require money at all. You can build systems into your game to allow players who don't have enough time to skip certain parts of the game. You can give them, how about letting the difficulty, letting them set it to easy instead of normal. Just give multiple difficulty settings that you can change mid-game if you feel a part's too hard for you. But the biggest thing about this, the biggest argument against this is, remember cheat codes? Remember Game Genie, Game Shark? Granted, those were third-party accessories, but remember cheat codes in games? You could enter a cheat code and get 30 lives or become invincible or whatever. Giving players a way to bypass grind, or you would have cheat codes to just skip levels back in older games. Giving players requiring players to pay to get the same privilege makes no sense, because the companies are presenting this as something they have to charge for. Like, oh gosh, we have to charge this. We're giving players a convenience option. They don't have to charge money to give players a convenience option. If they want to build that into their game, they can. Money does not have to be involved here. They're just making up an excuse to basically milk people for more money. So that doesn't make sense. The third example, the third argument that I see a lot is game costs are too high, and game companies need to charge microtransactions in order just to break even or to make enough money that they need to make on these games, just because game prices have stayed pretty constant over the past few decades. They're still $60. I think that's what they were charging back in the day for like NES games and Super Nintendo games. I remember some PS2 games costing that much that I bought back in the day. So they're trying to say that games these days cost a lot more to develop. They're a lot more resource intensive, which is true. And they're saying they have to charge these microtransactions. Well, a couple things on that. While it's true that game prices are up, I'm not sure that I buy the argument that companies need to make this thing, this microtransaction thing, the new norm in order to just make enough money, because I've not seen any kind of detailed analysis of these companies' financial statements, and I'm actually an accountant myself. Maybe I'll look into that and try to do that at some point. But I don't know that that's necessarily true. I haven't seen any proof of that. It could be true, but I haven't seen any proof of that. It could just be greed or companies wanting to make more money. And I'm not saying that's what it is. I'm just saying I don't have any proof one way or the other. And the next thing is, while it's true game costs have gone up, I feel like that is on the company in a lot of situations. Like the perfect example of that is companies pushing 4K. Xbox and PlayStation are pushing and pushing and pushing 4K, even though the market's not there yet. Like, yes, some people have 4K TVs, but the vast majority of people still are rocking 1080p TVs. Yet these gaming companies, by introducing new consoles, the PS4 Pro, the Xbox One X, they want to push 4K and produce these games that these really detailed, highly graphically intensive games that I'm not sure people are ready for. So I think a lot of the costs that they are spending is actually their own fault, and they just need to cut back their budget a little bit. Now, I know that there's a lot of horror stories out there about game staff in gaming companies being overworked, and I know that's true, and I feel for those guys, and I don't mean to insist that companies need to make people work more hours. I certainly am not saying that. I'm just saying they might need to stop spending money in areas that gamers don't care about. Perfect example is Star Wars Battlefront, the new release. The game company spent a ton of money. I forget what the name of the graphical style they use, but they spent so much money making that game look pretty, and no one cared because the game sucked. So I think a lot of times companies spend money on graphics that really isn't needed. Like for PC, I understand, but for consoles, like, people don't buy consoles for graphics. If you want the highest end graphics, you'll buy a PC and go the PC gaming route. I know for me, I'm fine with 1080p. I don't have to have, every game doesn't have to, like, they don't have to spend tons and tons of money on graphics. Just create a great game and it's going to sell. If it's fine if it's 1080p. It's fine if it's 1080p, 30 FPS or whatever. It doesn't have to be a super amazing graphically intense game that has all these complex textures and things, or has all this graphical resources and R&D put into it. They don't need to do that. So that's another thing. So I think game companies in a lot of situations just need to control costs themselves. And finally about this is even if it's true that that they need to charge the microtransactions in order to just make enough money or to break even or whatever to pay their bills, keep the lights on. Even if that's true, that's not the right way to go about recouping those costs. The console gaming market has always been about, in the past, it's changing now, but in the past it's always been about the buy and own philosophy. You pay your $60, you get the full game. And over time, companies are trying to convert what the new normal is and turn this into a situation where they're emulating like mobile games and non-console type games where you don't, when you pay for it, you don't get the whole game. Like the DLC comes into this, microtransactions come into this discussion, and they're trying to change this model. And what they really should do is just increase the price of games. Start charging $80 for a game. And I know a lot of companies, from what I've heard, from what I've read, are really scared to do that because they don't think people will buy games at $80. But I think that if companies just need to trust consumers more and actually offer them value. Like, let's say the next, say games that traditionally have offered a lot of value. Say like the Elder Scrolls Skyrim. If the next Elder Scrolls single player big campaign game came out and they said, we're going to charge $80, but there's going to be no microtransactions, no DLC. We're going to give you all this great content in this huge, well-made game that's pure quality, but $80 is what we need to charge to break even. And they show me that, and they tell me why, and they show me financially why that has to be. I'm fine with it. Like, I think that's totally reasonable, and I would be willing to pay higher prices for my games. So I think they need to trust consumers more. So those are the main three reasons I wanted to refute. So just looking at this logically, I personally do not see any reasonable argument for microtransactions. I think they have no place in the console gaming market when you pay full price for a game already. So let's get into a few other aspects that just kind of, I guess you could say, disturb me a little bit about microtransactions. And the first one is things like loot boxes, like stuff we've seen in Overwatch, loot boxes like we've seen in like we're going to see in Shadow of War, and I think we've seen in like Battlefield 1. Although when I played Battlefield 1, I didn't mess around with that stuff at all. But I think there's loot boxes in that game. But loot boxes introduced this element of gambling, which I think there's a moral question there, because you get into a situation where people are paying for basically a roulette, like a run on the roulette wheel, or a pull of the slots. If you don't know what loot boxes are, basically you can buy them or earn them in a game. And when you get a loot box, you get a random number of items or cosmetic items or real game items. It depends on the game. But basically you have a really great chance of getting useless crap and a very small chance of getting something really cool that you really want in the game, or that's really desirable in game. So when you sell people loot boxes, it's essentially you're selling people like spins on a roulette wheel. You know, there's a gambling aspect, and you're basically selling gambling to kids. And I think there's a big moral question about that. And I think that it's kind of a loophole with gambling laws, because other types of gambling, like say like online poker, has really big legal issues, whereas this, as far as I know, has gone untouched. So there is an element of gambling I really don't like, and I think morally, certain types of microtransactions like that are really morally questionable. So I'm not sure if it's morally right for these things to be included. My main issue with microtransactions, and I think a lot of others, people's issues, and this is really why I don't really like free-to-play games on mobile, although I play them from time to time, but I probably played on my cell phone like probably less than 5 mobile games, like actual real like heavy-duty mobile games in my entire life. But the main issue I have with microtransactions is it turns a fun, artistic gaming experience into this addictive, manipulative system that's really makes it so the game is not really designed anymore for you to have a great experience. It's not designed to be artistically creative. It's just designed to be this manipulative system that addicts you and nickels and dimes you. And that's the big problem. It turns games essentially into this addictive system instead of the game existing to provide entertainment. It's not there to provide entertainment anymore. In the case of a lot of these mobile games, it's just designed to addict you and to milk you. There's a really disturbing, manipulative aspect to microtransactions that really bothers me. And that's the main reason I don't ever buy them. I can't remember ever buying a single microtransaction I've never bought a microtransaction in a console game in my life for that reason that I can recall. So that really bothers me, and I think that just on that level, they shouldn't be in console games. Okay, now let's talk about why all this is happening. There's the big problem right now in console games is that console game manufacturers look at the console market, the console games market, and they don't even want to participate in it anymore in the way that's existed traditionally in the past. They look at the mobile game market and how much ridiculous amount of money the mobile market is making. And they want to do that because you can make a mobile game and make a crap ton of money for way less effort and resources than you can a console game. So all these game manufacturers for console games who have been traditional console game manufacturers don't want to make console games anymore. So instead they're kind of putting out now, I would argue, mobile games on console. I think stuff like Shadow of War is just they're starting to become mobile games. Like all your console games are starting to become mobile games because they're more profitable to make a mobile style type game instead of making this artistic buy once and you get it all type game, a console game that's existed in the past. So there's just a real problem right now in that mobile games are so profitable that the whole console gaming market just looks at mobile games and it's like, man, I want to get in on that. It's like every game manufacturer wants to get in on the mobile game market just because it's such a cash cow right now. And that's what really scares me. I mean, it seems like console games are just turning into mobile games right now, and at least that's the trend right now. I hope it implodes. I hope it blows up and reverses itself. But as of right now, it's starting to look like console games are returning more and more into mobile games, just because of how much more prominent microtransactions are becoming. And if this keeps up, I probably won't be interested in buying a console next generation. Just that type of game just never has never really appealed to me. Like the few times I've tried out the games like I mentioned before, like Kingdom Rush, I always reach a point where I'm like, this is stupid and I don't want to play. It's like I'm never going to get what I'm trying to say is I've tried them out before, but I'm never going to be like get into that mindset to where I can get into a game with microtransactions, spend the money on the microtransactions and feel good about it. I don't. Like, I feel dirty if I were to ever, like, at the thought of buying like anything through a microtransaction, just because I know that the system is designed to be addictive and manipulative. I know it's not there to provide me with any benefit. It's just there to addict me and manipulate me instead of actually just giving me an honest, full game for my money. So that's really why I'm not interested in buying them in the future. And I hope that developers face this problem of high game costs by either lowering the budget on their end by stop spending money on things we don't care about, or they just make the jump and raise the console the price of a console game from $60 and $80 or $90, whatever they need to charge, and take out all this crap like microtransactions and DLC and season passes. So that's how I feel about it right now. And if it doesn't go that way, if this is the future and console games become mobile games, that's I'll say goodbye to current gen gaming and just go back to the consoles I do have. So I have a PS2, I've got an NES, I've got an Xbox One, I've got a Wii U, and on those consoles there are thousands and thousands of games that I've never played. And particularly like the PS2 is really fun just because all the games there are complete on disc. None of those consoles. I mean, most of the games on those consoles I mentioned don't have microtransactions or DLC, exception being Xbox One. But I can kind of avoid the games that do have it. So my future will just be playing older consoles, which is fine with me if that does happen. But I hope it doesn't happen because I do like playing new games. So while I hope that's not our future, what really surprises me is just how successful the mobile strategy type game, like building a game, has been. There are so many people out there who get addicted to these things and spend so much money. Like, I'm so surprised that more people don't look at the microtransaction systems in mobile games and see right through the bullshit, because there's a lot of bullshit there. I can't believe people don't see that it's just designed there. It's designed to be addictive and to manipulate them. And like, so many people don't see that apparently because people spend so much money on these things. And I'm really disappointed that people aren't willing to spend more money up front for a game. For example, like a game like Super Mario Run that came out on cell phones, I think they charged $10 flat out for the game, but when you got the game, you got the whole thing. I mean, people aren't even the downloads for that game were super high, but the amount of people who actually bought the game for $10 was really low comparatively. So it really disappoints me that people are rejecting that model just because they don't want to spend so much more money up front. So that bothers me. But things you can do about this, if you agree with me and this does bother you, you can do two things essentially. You can, one, not buy them. Just don't buy microtransactions. That's the only vote you have that's going to matter, is your wallet. It doesn't matter if you go to Twitter or you go to Facebook and rant about microtransactions. None of that matters. It doesn't matter if you write up blogs about it. It doesn't matter. They don't care. The only thing that matters is your money and if you're spending it. So if you're spending money on microtransactions, please stop, because you're ruining it for the rest of us. And the other thing you can do is, number two, is just, if you have that friend who spends like a ridiculous amount of money on Candy Crush or whatever, just like explain to them like how that the game's built to like addict them and manipulate them, and just explain to them how the system works and how the game design works. and hopefully they'll see the light, and either at least if they continue to buy the microtransactions, they'll at least be like educated on the subject, and they'll at least kind of understand what they're getting themselves into in the future. So at least they'll have the basis on which to make a decision. I mean, if they want to buy the microtransactions with their money, that's their priority. I mean, that's a prerogative, but at least they would have some information to make a decision on. At least they would, maybe their light bulb would brighten up a little bit. So yeah, guys, that's going to be it for this video. Please comment below and let me know what you think about this. It's a topic that's been rolling around in my head a lot and actually makes me like, I don't know if I'd say mad, but it just bothers me a lot in terms of gaming. So yep, guys, hope you enjoyed. That's it for today. Have a good one. See you next time.